Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, January 29th, 2020. And today we're going to be discussing this new poll out of the state of California that discusses the 2020 Democratic primary. Now, this is actually not too far away. If you remember back in 2016, the Democratic primary in the state of California was right near the end. It was in June. Now it has actually been moved up to March, Super Tuesday time period. So it looks like California is going to have a very big impact on the start of the race. Right after we hit the early states, we're going to end up hitting into bigger states such as Texas or California. And pretty much that will build an even greater momentum for whichever candidate ends up winning in these individual states. Bernie Sanders, winning in California could be a huge deal for Bernie Sanders. If Joe Biden is to win in the nomination process, he needs to be at least competitive in California. Taking a look at 2016, it was pretty close. It was about a 6% margin for her over Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders, and made very little difference in terms of the delegates in the entire grand scheme of things, but it still can have a very lasting impact if, let's say, Bernie Sanders gets a pretty large amount of delegates and then Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg are fighting it out. But California, always been close. This time it is actually expected to go to Bernie Sanders. No real surprise, to be completely honest. Let's take a look at the 538 forecast. I actually haven't seen this recently. Sanders is expected to win 30% of the vote, so it doesn't look like he'll be getting the same amount of delegates he got before. Obviously, this isn't a two-way race yet, but we should still expect good numbers for Bernie Sanders. But this poll doesn't exactly cover everything that we should be discussing right here. Sanders builds lead in poll of likely California primary voters. Now, Elizabeth Warren is above Joe Biden according to this poll. To be completely honest, I'm not too trusting of that. I do think that Joe Biden is going to end up winning more of the vote than Elizabeth Warren. Let's actually see what our 538 says. Yes, they do say that. 161 delegates for Sanders, 140 for Biden, then 65.6 for Warren, and 34.5 for Buttigieg. But still, the numbers agree that Sanders is the forecasted winner to win in the state of California. But there's also these numbers right here. Supporters on Biden Sanders disagree on whether beating Trump is top priority in choosing a nominee. Obviously, Joe Biden has been flaunted as the most electable Democrat, which is exactly why 82% of Biden supporters think that they should choose the nominee based off who has the best chance of defeating Donald Trump, compared to Bernie Sanders, who has 65% of voters saying that the voting, Democratic nominee should agree with them on their personal issues. And, this is just showing the stark contrast of the same exact thing we saw in 2016, and pretty much a repeat, actually, of the Democratic nomination process from then. Hillary Clinton was, quote-unquote, the most electable candidate, or the more electable candidate, considering there were only two, whereas Bernie Sanders agreed with voters more based off his policy, but people really did not want Trump into office. Same thing actually applies now. Maybe the method didn't work back in 2016, but they still need to focus on defeating Donald Trump. If only 35% of Sanders voters are actually saying that beating Trump is the most important thing, well, it doesn't exactly spell out good news that the people that want an electable candidate are going to automatically flock to Bernie Sanders. That's just not the reality. Bernie Sanders has a lot of promising ideas for a lot of these Democrats, but a lot of them don't think that it's feasible in the general election. A lot of them think that they will be painted as socialists for supporting Bernie Sanders, him obviously included by President Trump, and that'll be something that could possibly hurt Bernie Sanders once we hit the general election. But overall, 53% of likely voters said that the priority in picking the candidate was the one who would be most likely to win. Then 47% said a candidate that agrees with them on personal issues. So that's pretty much an exact copy of what we saw in 2016 in terms of the actual Democratic primary vote, 53% to 46%, so 1% off. But that just goes to show how electability plays an argument into a lot of these, elections or primaries and caucuses. Yes, a lot of you guys may not think that Joe Biden is the most electable candidate, but he is perceived as such by a lot of top Democrats. And sure, you can argue that maybe if Joe Biden is the nominee, Donald Trump will be reelected, or if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, Donald Trump will be reelected. It looks like a lot of those candidates that are flocking around a candidate that people believe, quote-unquote, can actually win. It looks like it's going to be Joe Biden for that case. But this is not bad news for Bernie Sanders at all. In fact, it continues a trend that we see in a lot of states Okay, Iowa, Sanders victory. New Hampshire, Sanders victory. Nevada, actually, Sanders victory. Only one that isn't Sanders is South Carolina. Moving on to Super Tuesday, California is a Sanders victory. Texas is a Biden victory. North Carolina, Biden. The Super Tuesday is going to be a little bit better for Joe Biden, but regardless, it is, as of right now, I mean, if you can give Virginia and Massachusetts and Colorado, probably not Colorado, Tennessee to Joe Biden, but if California is going for Bernie Sanders, it's probably going to level out. And you see, at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden are probably going to be the final two candidates in this 2020 race. That's just how it's probably going to go. At the end of the day, realistically, the superdelegates are likely going to side with Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders really needs to get close to that outright majority of delegates, or not majority, outright winning number of delegates in order to secure the nomination with superdelegates. He needs to get very, very close, if not clench it. He probably won't clench it considering how much of a fighter Joe Biden is going to be. And when it comes down to a lot of these ending states, they're not really valued that much. So everything that we're seeing right now, the numbers, the data that we're seeing right now is probably how it's going to end up. And if Biden has a lot of early victories, he could stack up his early delegate counts. But besides that, Bernie Sanders going into the general election is an electable candidate, to be completely honest. He has the numbers to back him up in almost every single swing state. He may not be performing as well as Joe Biden, but he's still performing pretty well. A win is a win against President Trump. But the forecast of who's going to win the 2020 Democratic nomination, I mean, it dipped for Bernie Sanders at some point, and now it looks like Joe Biden has a 45% chance of winning. Bernie Sanders has a 29% chance, no one 15% chance, Warren 5%, Buttigieg 5%, and all of the rest is 0.4%. One person, if you haven't noticed, is not on here is Michael Bloomberg. He is probably not going to get any delegates, possibly one in Iowa. But a plurality of pledged delegates, that just means the difference between more than half pledged delegates means that it's going to be the person that actually ends up winning the entire nomination process outright. No superdelegates needed. A plurality of pledged delegates means that they get close, not quite. Then it goes into a second round or a quote-unquote contested convention where superdelegates will vote. The rule change in the DNC is that superdelegates do not get to vote in the first round. They will have to vote in the second round, typically how they did things before, but they cannot. The news numbers, I guess news stations will no longer add the superdelegates numbers onto the candidates with the respective votes that are expected to go for each candidate once the convention hits. But we are a long way away from the final primary, but we are very, very close to Iowa. In fact, 5 days from now, we will be hitting the Iowa caucus on Monday, February 3rd. It will be one of the most exciting things that I will have seen in a while. I will be trying to live stream it probably around 9 p.m. because Iowa does not come in with data. Also, the polls don't exactly close that early in comparison to where I am. I'm on Eastern Standard Time. So you should expect a live stream sometime around then. But this new California poll definitely ends up showing good news for Bernie Sanders. He definitely is going to carry this momentum further and further into the primary season. If Joe Biden doesn't cut him off at the Super Tuesday stage or even earlier, it looks like Bernie Sanders may actually have free reign onto the rest of the nomination process and could possibly win the nomination process outright. A lot of people said, oh, Joe Biden is going to win or Elizabeth Warren is going to win. Bernie Sanders will not be the nominee. Well, it looks like it's a very real possibility that Bernie Sanders does phenomenal. If he's going to win California, if he's going to win a number of early states, he's going to build up that momentum. He's going to go through with a number of delegates, and it is possible that Bernie Sanders ends up being the nominee without any single superdelegate vote cast, which would actually be for the Bernie supporters, an amazing thing for them. They fought the superdelegate system back in 2016 and won successfully. Mainly, they still have a say, obviously. And now it looks like he may not even need it. So, yes, the past couple of videos have been discussing Bernie Sanders' numbers increasing. He surged in every single state: California, Texas, Iowa, New Hampshire. I mean, he's getting up there right before the first election type caucus or primary that we are seeing for 2020. Definitely not good news for any of the other candidates. We should expect a lot of them to drop once we hit Iowa. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.